Hello from the Dukascopy TV studio in Geneva. I'm Daniel Schwenger. Alongside me to discuss cocoa production and how it can be assured in a sustainable way is Nick Weatherill from the International Cocoa Initiative in Geneva. Hello Nick, welcome to the studio.
Hello Daniel.
So actually, can we describe together, or can you outline the field of sustainable cocoa production? What does it mean and how is the ICI involved in that?
Sure. Well, a sustainable cocoa supply will be a supply of cocoa that meets the needs of today's consumption and consumers without compromising the ability of future generations to actually also meet their needs and demands for cocoa. And obviously sustainability is built on three pillars. It's built on the pillar of profitability, so it's about ensuring the longevity of profitability in the supply chain. It's built on the pillar of people, so it's about ensuring the well-being and the welfare of people who work all the way through the supply chain, particularly the farmers that grow the raw materials. And it's also built on the pillar of the planet, in other words, ensuring the well-being of the planet and the ecosystems in which it's grown. So towards that goal of sustainable cocoa, ICI's role is very much to shine the spotlight on the plight of children in the cocoa supply chain. On one side, because we find that they are often the victims of unsustainable farming practices. So there is quite a prevalent problem of child labor, particularly kids working on their family's farm. And for us, by definition, a supply chain that has children working and keeps children out of school, that is by definition compromising the future. So that's not a sustainable supply chain. And ICI's role is to focus on that problem specifically, but not only to solve the problem of kids as victims of unsustainability, but also to recognize that they are the future farmers. They're tomorrow's farmers. So we need to invest in them so that they can be, perhaps have a different skill set, be more business minded, and actually be more successful farmers in 10, 15 years time.
So to keep up the supply also for the higher demand of cocoa that is definitely there. And so what is the membership like at the ICI? Can you also talk about this?
Sure. So ICI is an independent non-profit foundation. And it has a very, it's called a multi-stakeholder initiative because it actually unites the chocolate and cocoa industry, civil society, and governments in producing countries, cocoa producing countries, unites them all in a collective effort to tackle the problem of child labour. So we have companies that are members of ICI, but we also have non-governmental organisations and development specialists and also the governments in those countries. We all work together because this is a complex problem and it requires different skill sets to be pooled and harmonized if we're really going to make progress.
So can you talk about the objectives more in detail? What are your current projects and where actually do you realize them?
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. Well, we are at the moment working in Ivory Coast and Ghana, which are the two biggest producers of cocoa. Between them, they account for more than 60% of global production. But they're also the two of the poorest producers. So this is obviously an environment in which sustainability is particularly challenging. We work on the ground. ICI has teams, very dedicated teams in both Ivory Coast and Ghana who are working in communities that grow cocoa. And in those communities, we're helping the farmers on a number of fronts. We're helping them put their kids into school rather than use their kids on the farm. We raise awareness of the issue. That's also a very important starting point. Then we improve access to education. We quite often build schools or renovate schools or build accommodation for teachers so that They actually want to work in these remote communities. We also work in partnership with others to improve farmers' income, because that's key. If farmers are poor, they will rarely have any alternative other than to use their children on their farms. So tackling that income problem at the household is very important. And then finally, we work with the companies in the supply chain, at various points in the supply chain, to help them monitor the problem and address it when they see it. So we have a sort of risk management model that we put in place with the companies, particularly in cooperative farms where they are buying cocoa.
Mm-hmm. So what are the goals in the future? Like, if you see your organization, what it can contribute, so what's there for the future?
So the future compared to the past, I mean, in the last 10 years, I think ICI made real headway in bringing this issue to the surface and building this very special coalition to advance change. And over the last 10 years, we estimate that we've sort of strengthened child protection for about 500,000 kids over 10 years. But we now have a new strategy which is all about accelerating the good practices and the improvements that we've made so far. So whereas over the last 10 years we reached 500,000 kids, our new objective is that by 2020, in the next 5 years, we will actually improve child protection in cocoa growing communities for 1 million children.
So here, as a picture, we have the ready product, chocolate. So actually, what are the challenges for sustainable cocoa production in the future, and where do you see like different partners and their objectives and responsibilities?
I mean, the main challenge is very much there in the question of whether or not supply will be sufficient to meet demand, because demand is growing. The emerging markets are representing a sort of fertile opportunities for companies, but to meet that demand, there is a need for more cocoa to be grown, and production in these two countries of concentration in West Africa is very limited by how old the trees are, by the general conditions of poverty that farmers live in. So we're really talking about fundamental systemic and structural problems that need to be addressed. And actually what needs to happen is that sort of cocoa farming needs, in a way, to be modernized. We need to move the status of and the role of a cocoa farmer from being a subsistence sort of man of the soil to being a businessman. And I think that's where the collective efforts of the industry are really being accelerated at the moment, not only in and within ICI's work, but more broadly. I think that the chocolate and cocoa industry realise that if they don't get this right, then there will be a significant shortfall in cocoa supply. But the challenges, as you've asked, are numerous. We're dealing with countries that are very poor, that have very poor rural infrastructure, poor access to services, poor access to education for kids. We're dealing with countries, and particularly Ivory Coast, which produces the majority of the world's cocoa, as just a few years ago came out of civil war. So this is not an easy task. Promoting child protection, improving access to education, tackling poverty, it's a huge task. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is to encourage companies, governments and everyone to dig in for the long haul. There's no quick fix to this problem, but if we all maintain the partnerships that we've got going, and if we accelerate the resources that we put behind this problem, and also the efforts and the collective working, we do believe that we can accelerate progress.
And what role does the consumer have in this?
Well, I think the consumer has a key role to play in all of this. They're at the other end of the supply chain. On one end, we've got farmers and relatively poor farmers, and often farmers who are using have no choice other than to use their kids on their farm to help out. And at the other end, you have consumers in the West who are eating the products at the other end of the supply chain. So they create the demand. So if consumers demand more sustainability from the manufacturers and from the supply chain as a whole, then that's an important signal. I think that our aspirations to accelerate progress are matched by consumer demands, and therefore can, in principle, be afforded. Because at the end of the day, this is very key. Sustainability, at least in the short term, it's an investment. It's about changing business models, and that doesn't come for free. It requires more resources, and so that may well translate down the line into consumers also needing to be ready to pay a bit more for the chocolate that they consume. But we're convinced that if, as a result of that, farmers that produce the raw material and their kids have a better quality of life and a better standard of life, then we believe that's worth it.
Nick Weatherill from the ICI, thank you for sharing your expertise with us today here in the studio.
You're very welcome.
And thank you for watching. Do make sure to keep clicking back on the Dukascopy TV website for latest updates and exclusive interviews. Have a great day and see you next time.